Live with CDP Sports Talk, a weekly sports and entertainment podcast sponsored by Barry Cullen Chevrolet. Live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, and LinkedIn. And on audio via Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, Anchor FM, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Radio Public, and TuneIn. Now, here's your host, Chris Palme.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Season 9, Episode 49 overall, 489 of Live with CDP Sports and Entertainment Talk Show, brought to you by Barry Cullen Chevrolet Dealership at 905 Woodlawn Road West in the Guelph Auto Mall. Check out their website, barrycullen.com, for the newest selection of new and pre-owned GM vehicles, along with their great selection of all-electric vehicles and their Cadillac products as well. You can call the dealership at 519-824-0210. Tell them Chris Palme sent you, or you can email them at info@barrycullen.com. Barry Cullen Chevrolet Dealership has been family run and operated here in the city of Guelph since 1969, and they've been a partner or sponsorship of Live with CDP Sports and Entertainment Talk Show the last 2.5 years. Live with CDP Sports and Entertainment Talk Show is also sponsored by Wellington Brewery at 950 Woodlawn Road West here in Guelph. Check out their website, wellingtonbrewery.ca. Try a Wellion, and please remember to drink responsibly. And Wellington Brewery is celebrating their 40th year here in Guelph, one of Canada's oldest local craft breweries as well. So check out Wellington Brewery as well as Barry Cullen Chevrolet. I hope everyone is doing well on this Wednesday, February 5th, 2025. And I'm excited to have my guest on today. This is his first appearance on my show, and I've been a fan of his since his days with the FAN590 in Toronto in the 1990s. And he is now the voice of the Buffalo Sabres on MSG Network and on WGR 550 in Buffalo. Dan Dunleavy, the voice of the National Hockey League's Buffalo Sabres, and winners of 4 straight games, including a thrilling 3-2 win over Columbus last night. Good morning, Dan. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Isn't that nice to hear finally for 4 straight wins for the Sabres? And it's unfortunately it's been a while, but the guys seem to have found a way to I think the phrase that has been used lately, and I think there's truth to it, they found a way to gut out some wins. So we've had some moments this year where they haven't been able to find the magic that it takes to finish off what they started or come back, and they've found a way to do it. So anyway, thanks for having me on the show, and I want to, on behalf of you, because obviously it's your business side of the thing, but I want to thank your sponsors on behalf of you, because for the folks at Barry Cullen and the brewery there, it matters to support local sports and sports personalities in Guelph. So good on your sponsors for doing that. Way to go.
Hey, Dan, one thing, I just found this out. I know the OHL team here, the Guelph Storm, I guess they honored the jock strap. I guess the hockey jock strap was invented in Guelph over 100 years ago. So this weekend they became the Guelph jock straps and used the logo and colors too. So Guelph's got a history with hockey, especially with the hat trick by the Guelph Bitmores.
So you're telling me the Guelph Storm, the Guelph Storm became the Guelph jockstraps for a game?
For 2 games this weekend, yes. To honor the history of...
I need to see... So they changed their uniforms as well?
They did that for 2 games. They changed the name of the team and the uniforms for 2 games to honor...
And the uniforms. All right, well, I hope they're auctioning those off. I need to check
I think
out
they
the
are.
video on that. Are they?
I'll try to get you some information, but they wore it for 2 games and stuff like that. And I didn't know the jock strap was invented in Guelph 100 years ago. I knew about the hat trick with the Guelph Bitmores, but Guelph's got a long junior A hockey history too.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. And you've got me looking this up while we do the show here, but I'll look into the details of it later. So good for you. I thought I had a fun little tidbit last night on the show, and with JVR, taking a high stick in the face and losing some teeth, and then they stitched him up for 30 stitches, and he came back to play in the rest of the game. He was in Utah a couple of games ago. We told it on the broadcast last night. And then after the game, they took x-rays, and they found out they stitched one of the broken teeth into his lip. So they had they had to cut him open and remove the tooth but that was after the game. But that's nothing compared to the story you just shared. So I'm gonna look that up. But if you're real with this one, I think I'm gonna have this on the next Sabres broadcast. We're in Nashville.
I'm real. I'm real. And one guy I could put you in touch with would be Larry Malott. He's been the Guelph Storm broadcaster for over 30 years and in Guelph for 40 years. And anybody knows junior A hockey in Guelph, Larry Malott is the guy to speak to. But
yep.
I will definitely try to get you some pictures and stuff like that. And yeah, I believe they are going to auction off the jerseys as well. And I think it was a great promotion.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I'm curious, as I say, we're talking here now, and I'm still trying to look this up. So I do see it. They were orange jerseys, and they were the jock straps. Holy cow!
Yeah, wow. Absolutely. And
okay,
I have
that deserves some pump. I think that's good. I like it.
And that's what I love about doing this, Dan, is just the learning stuff and finding out stuff and sharing it on my broadcast, storytelling.
Yeah, good for you. And yeah, I prefer it a lot more than goals expected. So I'm good with that. Not taking it away from those that love expected goals and all this stuff. I understand that's where the game statistically is going, and I'm okay with that as well. Was more always big into the storytelling and what's going on behind the scenes of things than just everything going on with stats. But like even now, I'm just glued to this whole Guelph Storm, Guelph jockstrap story. That's really cool. Anyway.
I'm hoping eventually they'll honor the Guelph Platers. That's the last Memorial Cup team in Guelph in 1986. And Jacques Martin was their head coach, and not Kirk Muller, but Gary Roberts and the late Steve Chason was on that team as well. So I just love hockey.
Yeah, I think the last time, and good for you, the last time I was in Guelph to see a game, Robbie Fabry was playing there that's actually now a number of years ago.
About 10 years
and I remember
ago.
coaching. I remember talking with Coach Walker at the time. I was down there with Sam Cosentino. And so we were obviously doing a Sportsnet game. I think it was London versus Guelph, most likely to be on Sportsnet at that time. And we were talking with Coach Walker about this guy. And he was just saying how talented Robbie Fabry is and how he was going to make the National Hockey League. There was no doubt about it. And obviously injuries and everything else kind of played a role in Robbie's career. But every time I see Robbie on the ice and I just kind of cheer for him a little bit. But that, as you know well, that's the connection when you're around whether it's the OHL, the Western League, or the Quebec Maritime League. You get to know the stories of these guys when they're 17, 18 years old and trying to make the National Hockey League. And so you kind of cheer for them a lot more. I mean, I remember my time at St. Mike's, and you were cheering for guys to have success. And many of them were getting drafted actually because they were good players, but you would just hope that they would find a way to stick in the NHL. And even in as far back with the Brampton Battalion, when I started, I was doing public address announcing for them. And before some play-by-play came up near the end of my tenure there, but, cheering for guys like that too, that, eventually would make the National Hockey League and have some pretty good careers. And, they all have stories to tell, which are a little easier to tell when you've known them when they're 17 and 18 years old and then turn into young men and then fathers and family men. So it's a good connection to have to the OHL, and you're in a great town in Guelph to do that.
Thanks. And it's just a shame the OHL has not worked out in Toronto. They've tried it with the St. Mike's. They've tried it with the Mississauga Ice Dogs, the Mississauga Steelheads. They're now in Brampton for now, but I suspect eventually the Brampton team will probably relocate at some point. But OHL is great hockey. And hey, Dan, I also want to say thank you so much for coming on here. And I've always enjoyed your work over the years, going back to your days with the FAN590 in Toronto. And I think the 1990s was kind of the golden era of radio in Toronto.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. You know what? I was actually last night at the game up in the press box. I was just making my way up to set up in the booth before the game last night, and I was talking with Pat Malacaro, who you know well. He was for WGR 550 in Buffalo. For those that don't know, he's the voice of the Buffalo the Bison's baseball team, and also does some hockey play-by-play as well. I think at Niagara or Canisius. It's one of the two. So I beg your pardon for not being right on that one. More for Pat's case than mine. But Pat has shared with me some of his work, and he's a really good hockey play-by-play guy too. So. But anyway, I was telling Pat the story, and he was carrying an orange water container with him. And I said, "Oh, I like the color orange. Where's that from?" And he said, "Oh, well, I went to Syracuse. So my mom, anytime she can't think of anything to buy me for my birthday or Christmas, will just get me something orange because I'm a Syracuse grad and alum." And I said, "Oh, well, I used to work with a guy in Toronto. Have you ever heard of the name Norman Rumack?" And he hadn't. So you talk about sports radio back in the 90s and people who listen to the Fan in Toronto. And if you're too young to not have done so, I would suggest finding somewhere on YouTube some audio or something of Storm and Norman Rumack, because I think I framed him last night for Pat. He was not a shock jock for sports radio, but he was basically an overnight talk show host on the Fan. He would do some evenings and daytime slots as well, but he made his name on doing the overnight show, as you know, and just being a guy that was on after Leaf games and going through the midnight hour, and very unabashedly and not shy to admit that he was a massive, and probably still is a massive, Toronto Maple Leaf fan. And in those days, he was very much in the corner of Wendell Clark. Wendell Clark could do no wrong, and Norman Rumack was the ultimate an all-time defender of anything number 17 in a Leaf uniform would do. And at the same time, Norm was very respectful and a really knowledgeable, and still is, hockey fan. So he loved all of the big names and big stories around the game, but he was a Leaf guy through and through. And Storm and Norman Rumack is basically, he'd come on and he'd take some calls, and there'd be some calls that I don't know how you want to frame them or categorize them, but there were some off the wall calls, people demanding trades of certain players and bringing up just absolutely, not let's just say nutty ideas for trades that would never happen in a million years from the mouth of a hockey general manager. But people would throw it out there because they were passionate and they were upset. And if they crossed a line of any kind of sensibility, Norm would call the caller out, and he'd call you a hammerhead. So he wouldn't call you stupid or silly or anything really abrasive like we see on social media now. He would just call someone a hammerhead, which was, and it grew. It took on, a just this energy and body of its own. And eventually someday Norm would tell the story better than me. I don't know if you've had him on the show, but if you hadn't, you really should have him on the show, because he could tell the story from his, firsthand point of view. But somebody came up with, basically a sound bumper. So every time somebody would come on and it would be a hammerhead call, Norm Rumack would have this sound played by the operator behind the glass, because in those days you didn't have the ability to control your sound effects on a computer like you could at times perhaps now in whatever radio studios are left. And it was this sound that just said hammerhead alert, and there was a siren that would go along with it. And so the op behind the glass would play that, and that was Norm just saying, okay, you know what, that's a silly call, silly point. But people they started calling up just to give wacky ideas and comments because they wanted Norm to play the hammerhead alert sound on their call. It was something that people wanted to hear. And then that turned into t-shirts being everywhere with hammerhead alert. And it was a hammer, and on the hammerhead was a bit of a characterization, or cartoonish, if you will, of Storm and Norman Rumack. And they were on fire. You'd wear them to Maple Leaf Gardens, to the ballpark at a baseball game, or to an Argo game, anywhere in Toronto. And people would ask you, how'd you get your Hammerhead Alert shirt, and how do I get one? So, you bring up those days in radio and those days at the Fan. So many people went through there, and so many people have been just incredibly successful in their careers. Dan Shulman being the main name that comes to most people's minds, and his work down here in the States and up in Canada with the Blue Jays. But you want to talk about personalities? The guy was that was Storm and Norman Rumack, because he did something nobody else was doing, and it was just 100% Norm. And if he's out there and he's watching and listening to this, Normie, I hope you're doing good.
He's on my Facebook list as a friend, and I'm hoping one day to have him on my show, because he's somebody I used to like listening to late night radio with Storm and Norman. And even if he didn't agree with you, he would let you express your opinion. And I also know, remember, he marketed those shirts too, the Hammerhead shirts as well. And and I've been lucky to have Barry Davis on my show, and Dan has been on my show as well. And one of my first guests, Dan, I was shocked. This was 4.5 years ago, and I was really new to this. Jerry Howarth came on my show for over an hour.
Oh, that's great. Yeah,
he's one of the he's one of the nicest people you ever met, and I've been very fortunate to have guests come on here, and especially you, Dan. Like I said, I really appreciate you coming on today, and
Hey, no worries. Listen, you bring up Jerry Howarth, and I know he probably talked about Tom Cheek, and you asked him about Tom. But because you brought up the name, I'll recollect for you. I didn't think you were going to ask about it, but you brought it to memory. The first time, excuse me, that I worked on a Jays broadcast. So back in those days when I started, which was back in '93, it was so pretty early on in the fan. The fan had just really got rolling. And then I had a couple of offers in Toronto, and between 680 full-time sports and staying at the fan, where I was working part-time weekends and full-time in Orangeville 5 days a week, and then both days on the weekends in Toronto at the fan, ultimately decided to stay at the fan. Alan Davis, who was the general manager or the program director at WGR 550 in Buffalo, was the program director in Toronto at the fan at that time. And he said, you're not going anywhere. You're staying here at the fan, as opposed to going over to 680 at that time. So that's when I arrived. And back in those days, Scott Ferguson, again, a very extremely popular sportscaster and Blue Jays host and very knowledgeable baseball guy. Just loved the game of baseball. Scott did. He loved sports. But Fergie was the afternoon sports guy. And when I started full-time at the fan, I remember Alan Davis saying, we don't have a full-time update position for you or host position, but in the meantime, you're going to do weather and traffic on the morning show with Bob McCowan. And that's, not really what I signed up for, but it was an early lesson in the business that the importance of being in the door where you want to be matters more than the job you're doing in that specific moment. Just do it well, do it right, be on time, show up, and eventually the opportunity that you were looking for is going to come up, and just be ready for it. So I learned that lesson pretty early, both in Orangeville before 8 years before the fan ever happened, and then when I got to the fan as well. And it was, and even with the Sabres, when you think about it, how things worked out. But I think in all these positions that, I'd show up somewhere and I thought I was ready and more than able to step into a position, I was kind of put on hold. At least that's the way it felt to me, until that position was truly open and truly there for yours for the taking. So it was that way up in Orangeville, where I wrote news out of newspapers on weekends and left them for the newscaster on Monday morning, when I felt, well, I should be doing the newscast. I'm writing the news, but there were some lessons to be learned there. So I did that for quite a while before I got on the air, and then get to the fan and do weather and traffic on Bob McCowan's morning show and not doing any sports updates. Well, that eventually turned into sports updates and everything I could possibly do at the fan. And then that turned into, showing up, auditioning for the Sabres, and then having someone else get that opportunity. Then the Toronto Maple Leafs calling, with Dennis Bayak moving and being afforded the opportunity to sign a contract with the Maple Leafs and do their radio for a couple of years while Joe Bowen was on television. And then that turned into the Sabres calling back and saying, actually, can we backtrack and bring you in to take over for Rick Jeanneret when he retires, which at that point was going to be 3 years down the road, which turned into 10 years down the road. So it's interesting. You look in the rearview mirror, and I think it's a lesson that I do share with a lot of people in any business, that they're in a hurry to get somewhere. It's just realize that the road that you're on might very well be the road that you're meant to be on, and just keep believing in yourself and keep working. And that goes, I know you and I talk about it a little bit when I saw you at the rink, is that you're on the right course. You love what you're doing here with your podcast, and you're very hard working at it. Just keep doing it, because at some point, you're happy doing it, and then you never know where it's going to lead you. So that's the realization I came to. And certainly at the fan and doing the little bits here and there, it turned into, and this is coming full circle finally back to Jerry Howarth, Scott Ferguson one day could not make it to the Jays game. So they needed someone to sit in and basically do the in-game updates from out of town, and sit with Tom and Jerry and do the ball game. So I remember that being my number was called, and I'm sure there were other people that if they were there, they would have had the opportunity, but I was there. I may have been doing weather and traffic at the time, but they needed somebody that night for the game. I happened to be sitting in the building, and bam, I'm sitting with Tom Cheek that night at a Blue Jays game, and I couldn't believe it. Similar to my first time sitting at a World Junior Hockey Championship game and calling a Canada-Russia game overseas in Finland, and then, similar to calling an Olympic hockey game, the women's gold medal game in Vancouver, and then the men's bronze medal game, and sitting with Peter Marwell, he called the men's gold medal game and hosting every single game there. I couldn't believe that was happening. And then couldn't believe the Maple Leafs called without me auditioning. And then I couldn't believe that the Sabres called and asked me to audition. And the first guy I worked with there was Harry Neal. So all these things that you never planned for, but certainly put yourself in the building to be there for when the opportunity comes, they eventually happen. And for some, they happen really quick. For me, it really didn't start unfolding till I was in, at least from a National Hockey League point of view, till I was in my 40s. But I never gave up. I just thought there's not a chance I'm giving up. There's not a chance that I don't believe I can do this. So just kind of hung around. So I'm in the booth with Tom Cheek, and Jerry was there. So you know how they would alternate innings. So I was with Tom for the most part, and he couldn't have been nicer. I mean, what a genuine, and he knew I was nervous, and boy, did he ever make me feel at ease and calm. And so I would do the out of town scores. Then he'd ask me a little bit about what I thought about the Jays, and just kind of eased me into that ball game. And I felt like when I left that booth, because I thought, well, nobody can replace Scott Ferguson, similar to, well, no one's going to replace Dennis Bayak here on the Leafs radio call, sharing it with Bonesy. And then no one's going to replace Rick Jeanneret. So I learned early that you're not there to replace anybody. You're there just to do the job. That's it. Bottom line. If you start thinking about who you're replacing or whose shoes you're filling, you're not. You're stepping behind a microphone or in front of a camera, and you're doing a job. So just, you always hear about players and coaches trying to tell them just to do their job. And I take that same approach with what I'm doing. And every night it's not done perfectly, but the next day I'm going to be back trying to be better than I was the next day. So that lesson was taught because you brought up Jerry Howarth in a big part from the first time I ever sat with a guy that I was in awe of, and that was Tom Cheek.
Absolutely. And I'm going to be honest, Dan, in my 20s, I loved sports, but I don't think I would have been ready for this when I was younger, because I would have been in awe. And one of my early guests was also from the FAN590, Eric Smith, the voice of the Toronto Raptors. He came on my show when I first started. He gave me some great advice. He goes, Chris, you can write down points and notes, but talk to your guests, natural conversation. And Chuck Swirsky, who was with the Raptors in 590, came on my show. And these guys, Eric and Chuck and Jerry, have given me advice over the years, and I've tried to apply it to myself and my style, and tried to continue to improve and have really good conversations with all my guests.
Yeah, well, listen, the fact that you're doing it, I mean, that's the start, and that you're doing it in this really positive light. And I see how much, we did talk a bit about this when I saw you at KeyBank Center in Buffalo. There are far more platforms now than there ever were. You're talking about the early days of the Fan. If we reference that again, these avenues weren't there yet. Eric Smith, you bring his name up. A couple of stories real quick. He's the first one that ever introduced, at the time, I still call it Twitter, but he's the first person at the station, at the Fan, that I remember walking in, and he was telling everybody about this thing called Twitter. And I'm like, what is, he says, yeah, you tweet. And I said, what do you mean you tweet? What are you talking about? So we learned what Twitter was from Eric. And so shame on him for making it, half good, half evil, but we'll stick with the half good, shall we?
Yes.
And then from there, obviously, just everything else. TikTok, I'm not into it, but I get it. I know what it's all about for this generation. I've never been on Facebook in my life, and I don't plan to be. Although then you look at, as soon as you're on Instagram, you're on the same company that owns and runs Facebook. So whatever you do on Instagram is going to wind up on Facebook somewhere. So it's a different world that way. But the fact that you realize that, and it really doesn't matter when you start, as I said before, the fact is you've started and you're in it, and who knows where it goes. It might stay exactly where it is, and that's what it's meant to be. Not all it's meant to be. That's what it's meant to be. I look back too, and I often think, what if the breaks didn't come, and what if I just kept doing traffic and weather somewhere? When I say just, I mean, it's because it was not my plan. I'm not saying it's far more important. I mean, I listen to traffic and weather on the ones all the time. It's all I do. It's literally the one regular thing I do every day. Everything else you're hoping is regular, but it's not. But traffic and weather together on the ones, whether it be on Spectrum News here in Buffalo, whether it be on 680 in Toronto, or any other station you listen to, those are really important jobs. And doing those jobs that I didn't plan on doing, and finding out how important they were, it taught me a valuable lesson, is to say, look, you are part of a team here that is relaying information to people. And that's what you're doing right now. So you're relaying information to people. I didn't know till now about the Guelph jockstraps, and I should have known. Shame on me, because I am a hockey guy. But, so you've already done your job in that. So good for you for doing it. Keep doing it. And Eric Smith is one guy that I gave advice to, and I'm glad he didn't follow it, because Eric wanted to get into some kind of play-by-play, and he was a big basketball fan. And I remember telling him once, I said, look, I was given the same advice too, wanting to do play-by-play years ago, and I'm going to give it to you. And I said, don't sit and be stuck here at the Fan or in Toronto waiting for that opening to come, because Swirsky's not going anywhere. At the time, Paul Romanuk, who started off, wasn't going anywhere. And just basically anyone who was already cemented in the roles, which I now, understand from my point of view, being in Buffalo, is that you don't plan on going anywhere. You love this job. You've worked hard for it. You don't plan on going anywhere. So I said to Eric, make sure you keep your mind open to moving around a little bit. So look around, and maybe there's an opportunity in another market, and be open to that. Be open to a move. Be open. If this is really what you want, there are 32 teams out there. I'm just going to use the NHL as an example. Be open to living in any of those 32 places, because back in the early 90s or 2000s, that then opened up 64 jobs for you. It's not the case as much anymore, but it did. So that's what I said to Eric. And then very soon after that, I don't know how many years it was, but all of a sudden the Raptors play-by-play opening actually did come open for him. And as he was hosting a show for so many years and just talking about it, he was a natural fit. He was ready. So the same way that I had, and the same way that you're doing with yourself now, he kept himself in a position in a market where if that opening came up, he was going to be there, and he was going to put himself in a position where he could take that job. And for me, I'll always remember it was Bill Waters, who, of course, formerly with the Toronto Maple Leafs as a general manager. I remember I had an opportunity out in Western Canada in the Western League, and I always wanted to live out in the mountains and just kind of be this Western time zone guy. So I got the opportunity that I'd always been waiting for, but I'd already been at the Fan for, I don't know, maybe 9 of the 20 years or so that I was there, or a bit more. Let's see, 2000. So yeah, like 8 years. And I got an opportunity to go out west, and it was a really good one to do play-by-play in the Western League. And I called Bill, was one of the people I called, just to get some advice on what to do. And his advice was actually different from what I was giving Eric. He said, look, you can go out in the Western League and you can work in a market there, and you may eventually progress and get an opportunity to work in the NHL. The one thing you'll be doing is you'll be leaving a market where you've made a name for yourself over the last 8 years at the Fan, and those jobs don't come along very often, because it is Toronto and that's where everybody wants to get to. So you're actually going to be doing it in reverse. You're going to be going to the small market to do the job you want to do, but then you might never get back into Toronto. So I took that advice to heart, and I pondered it overnight. And then I walked into the general manager's office out in the Western League, and I told him, I can't believe I'm doing this, but I'm actually saying thanks, but no thanks for the job. And I got a pretty good stare down, but I got a handshake at the end of that meeting, and told that I had a lot of guts to come in and say that after I was flown out there for the interview and everything. But it was just another lesson, that there's no one specific way. You just have to, people who are going to give you advice in this business, but you have to follow your gut. And after talking with, first myself in my own head about this job in the Western Hockey League, and living out in a really nice area, in BC, I was out in Kelowna, and just kind of weighing that with staying in Toronto. So when I made the decision to stay in Toronto, I remember calling the program director, and Nelson Millman had taken over by that time. And Nelson said, all right, you're staying. Well, pack your bags. You're going to cover the Olympics. Because at that point, Howard Berger, who had covered the Olympics for years, had decided he was not going to cover the next games. So I actually hopped a flight and went off to Sydney, Australia, which again, didn't plan for that happening, but holy cow, all of a sudden I'm headed off to Sydney, Australia, and I'm there for about a month, 3.5 weeks to a month, covering the summer games, which was a crazy, wild experience. And then that turned into doing the games in Athens, Greece, covering them as well, and then also being part of the 2010 Olympic team with, Rogers Radio at the time. So it's interesting. I'm glad Eric never took my advice, and I'm glad that Bill Waters was there for me to give me a bit of the opposite advice, actually, when you think about it, and just kind of followed my gut on that one, and it worked out.
I just never thought when I started this 5 years ago, it would come to this far. But one of my friends, Pat Gregor from TSN, he's a National Lacrosse League analyst.
Yep.
I met him on a bus trip, and he befriended me, and he watched me every night on Instagram. And I wasn't very good, but Pat kept telling me to keep at it, and eventually I started getting guests on my show, and such as people like Dan and Jerry, Eric, and Chuck Swirsky. And I was shocked they came on, and everybody in your profession has been really great. And doing media work for the Argonauts, the Bisons, the Bandits, the younger people don't care about my age. They just like the fact that I've got a passion, and I just love doing what I'm doing. And I just want to, this is something I'm taking a different path than a lot of other people are, but nowadays with this technology, it's a lot different than it was back in the 80s and 90s for radio.
Yeah, no, 100%. As I say, not to belabor it anymore, but you're a good example for people who, they might have another career going right now, but they want to dabble in sports. And if you do it the right way and you treat people properly, they'll come on your show. And just be you. And the big thing, obviously, in today's, and I don't think I did it enough to be a great talk show host. I remember once being told that I was put on in the mornings, with a guy by the name of Andrew Crystal, who was at the Fan for a little bit. Bit of a bombastic guy, to say the least, very opinionated. Did very little homework on sports. He was a sports fan. And when he came to the Fan, it was a little bit insulting to some of us that he would show up and not have watched the Leaf game the night before and just basically admit it. And he would say so on his show. I'm not spilling any secrets here. He would say, I didn't even watch the game last night, but this team sucks. I'm thinking, you can't do that. I mean, if you're going to work here, all of us that are doing this right now, from the Elliot Friedmans to, the Dan Schulmans and Ken Daniels and Joe Bowen, all of us that have been here, we worked at it and we did watch the games. And even if we didn't want to, for whatever reason, maybe didn't feel like it, you watch every game all the time. But, this guy would show up and not watch the games. But he was a morning show host for a reason, just like Bob McCowan was, because he was not shy to have this personality burst through the microphone and say what the bleep he wanted. And then he'd have to have his arguments with management over what he said. And there usually was a program directors meeting, I'm sure, with both the Bobcat and certainly with Andrew, who was passed on, by the way. So I say all this in memory of Andrew, but I do remember sitting with him once, and I was just kind of shaking my head thinking, why am I doing this? Why am I here? And it was the first time I ever doubted myself at the Fan. But I was reassured by Don Collins, our program director at the time. He said, look, we need you there with him because he is so, like, we don't know what's coming out of his mouth next. And to the point that I just mentioned, they knew he wasn't watching any of the games he was talking about, and he's on a morning show. So the Leafs played the night before, and this guy sits at a microphone saying, okay, so who watched the game last night? I didn't. He'd walk into the building that morning. I'd get in at 3:30, getting ready for the morning show at 5, putting a scoreboard show together. And he'd ask me, so what happened in the Leaf game last night? And I'm thinking, why am I telling you? You're getting paid all the big bucks and you're sitting at the morning show microphone, and the rest of us are going to put in the work and help you? I don't think so. Not that I wouldn't want to help somebody, but it was just every day. It was all the time. I thought, no, I'm not doing it. But I was told that you need to be the straight, reasonable, kind of sensible voice on the show. Well, he is the bombastic one. Now, nobody really listens to radio for this nice, calm, reasonable voice. It's nice to have in certain conversations, especially in a political climate. You're kind of looking for that, right? Because you got one side here and one side there, and they are not going to talk to you like there's any other room for opinion. So you need someone kind of right down the middle. At least I would prefer it. I think most people would, so they can at least tell you the grand scope of what's going on. So the big thing is to let your personality shine and make sure you do your homework. And I know you do that. So good on you for that.
Jerry hammered that in on me too, to always do your homework. And all my guests, I prep and prepare. And I know you went to Niagara College with Rick's son, Rick Jeanneret. And
Mhm.
I found out some stuff about you I didn't know, Dan, that you were the public address announcer for the Toronto Argonauts, and you did the Toronto Rock games for a couple years on radio and as a public address announcer. And I love finding out tidbits about my guests.
Yeah. Well, I did the Toronto Rock for a long time, actually. Back when the team first came out of Hamilton to Toronto and they played at the Gardens, I remember the announcement like it was yesterday in their hot stove lounge, and it was 1999 that that the Rock came from Hamilton and playing out of Toronto. I remember the announcement, and our station right away grabbed on with the radio rights. And I did their games for had to be 8 or 9 years, close to 10. I mean, and we had a run. I'll tell you what. And I say we because I traveled with the guys. We flew commercial flights, got to know all of them. You know, the veteran of course, of all of them. Jim Veltman, who was the captain back then, now coaching. Glenn Clark now coaching in the league. Pat Coyle coaching in the league. Bob Watson, the goaltender. You had. Colin Doyle was an MVP and a rookie of the year. Caleb Toth, who scored that really exciting goal at Maple Leaf Gardens to beat Rochester to win the championship with about a second to go in the game. Remember that one like it was yesterday. That was the last game ever played at Maple Leaf Gardens. Joe Bowen called it on television, and I was doing the radio side of things. So, yeah, that was a real nice run. The Argonaut thing, Greg Manzik, who used to work at City TV, he was working with the Argonauts, and I'm not sure if he's still around the team or not. But it sounds like you know Greg really well. Joe Bowen, it's funny. It's the 6 degrees of separation from Joe Bowen, isn't it? So Joe was doing the PA announcing for, I don't know how many years for the Argos. And then he, for whatever reason, couldn't do it anymore. And Greg Manzik and I ran into each other, and he asked if I would be interested. And I said, without a doubt, let's do this. So I was really nervous about that one because I'd never done it before. Big football fan. Loved the game. Went to Argo games as a kid. There was a picture of me in the Toronto Sun when I was younger, going to an Argo practice one day when the Toronto Sun Sunshine Girls were and the Argonaut cheerleaders were at the practice. So I was getting autographs from guys like Minter and just the players back then, and then the cheerleaders would come over, and yeah, somehow my picture ended up in the Toronto Sun. So for a kid from Georgetown, Ontario, that was pretty cool. And then doing the PA for them was really awesome. I mean, Pinball Clemens was still playing for him at the time. I remember announcing his name when he'd come running out of the players' tunnel onto the field, and the Sky Dome at the time would go absolutely crazy. So that, they were the biggest crowds I'd ever kind of put my voice in front of, aside from being on the radio. That it was another really great experience. I did that, I think, for about, I'll say 2 years. It might have been 3, but I think it was 2 or 3 years. That I did that job too.
Toronto Argonauts have been really good with my media work. And by the way, I do have a connection with Joe Bowen, not him per se, but his son, Sean Bowen, does the in-game hosting at BMO Field. And Don Landry has been on my show a number of times. He used to be the Argos PA guy and on the FAN590. And Mike Hogan does a great job as their voice. And Adam Goss is their current PA announcer. He did it at the Rogers Center too. And the Argonauts have been a terrific organization. They're my childhood team, and they've given me so many opportunities. I didn't go to school for this, Dan, but teams like the Argonauts, the Buffalo Bandits, the Buffalo Bisons, and the Canadian Baseball Hall of Fame have given me a lot of opportunities to hone my media skills.
Yeah, that's great. Like I said, the sports community, they'll help you out. If you're good to people, they'll help you out. There's no doubt about it. There'll be ego in some younger athletes. Like the sport I didn't like covering was baseball when I was at the Fan. I just had enough incidents where I really felt belittled by some of the players at times when I would go up very shyly, actually, and I know politely because it's the way I was raised, and asking for their time before a game and trying to get some sound before a Blue Jays game. And, I did quite a bit of that. When Fergie would be hosting or Bob McCowan on the pregame show doing primetime from the Dome. So I'd be down trying to fish out interviews from players before the game. And some of them were great. I will say there was a large percentage of them that just made life really difficult. Didn't like it at all. And it's the only sport I ever went back to the Fan. I remember talking to Scott Metcalf, our sports director, and I just had enough one day. And I said, I can't do this anymore. I said, I can't believe I'm telling you this, but you need to find somebody else who will talk to these ball players because they are looking down on me like I'm some human being that just is not worth a breath to them. And I just didn't feel good going to the ballpark and feeling like I had to beg for somebody's time. So, that's the other thing you kind of, for the most part, that's what I love about hockey. You don't get that in hockey. I mean, you might be shy initially going to speak to certain players. I remember being scared to death to ask Patrick Waugh or Brett Hull a question, but once you sucked it up and you did, they were great. Jeremy Roenick back when he was playing, the bigger than life personalities from that era coming through, and Wayne Gretzky, of course. I mean, I worked the visitors room at Maple Leaf Gardens, and Ken Daniels helped me kind of learn the way around the National Hockey League rooms and what have you. So, but yeah, baseball was the one game, and I certainly hope the players are a bit better than they were back then, because it's not a word of a lie. I lived it. It wasn't fun. So I said to Scott, no, I'm not doing baseball anymore. I don't need to talk to these guys. I think I'm just basically a piece of dirt on their shoes sometimes. So, but that was really the only negative in the entire, my sports experience. Every other sport, CFL, as you know, those guys are fantastic. I've not covered the NFL, but I know the guys here in Buffalo that cover the Bills, because this is the first town I've lived in where there's an NFL team. Obviously, the Bills were always kind of Southern Ontario's team as well for the most part. And there's a lot of fans of other teams in Ontario, but certainly once you get down, Toronto and then south of there towards the border, it's a big, big, big Bills population. So you were already well educated on the team and the culture around here. But getting to know the guys that cover the team here on a daily basis, the players are fantastic. So that's another good thing.
Hey, Dan, I know I've kept you over 30 minutes. Do you have time for like a couple more quick questions?
Yeah, what are we, 12:16 here while we're doing this? Yeah, I can stay till we'll go 12:25. How's that? Another 10 minutes.
Okay, perfect. I was going to say, Dan, have you thought about in the future writing a book about your career in radio and media?
I've thought about it, and the first thought that comes to mind, who would give a crap? Pardon my Canadian English and French, but I think there's some stories for everyone to tell that achieves what they set out to achieve, because on the way to get to where I am today, which I feel very fortunate to, and it's funny, at least I do, my entire career from getting into Orangeville to the Fan to 680 to the Toronto Maple Leafs to the Buffalo Sabres, and then to all the other, parts or connections along with it. You mentioned with doing the Argonauts PA, and doing PA announcing for the Brampton Battalion, just to get my first start into the OHL before St. Mike's and working with that organization. Every time I felt like this could be taken away from me tomorrow, I need to be really careful, and I need to be really professional. I need to be really respectful, and I need to understand that I'm living in the moment, because so many people want this job right now that even though they're being nice to me, they might be me behind me, just waiting for me to say, I'm done, or I'm moving on to something else. And then they're going to jump in. And then the next thing, the next generation kind of comes along, or the next moments, however long that may be. So I have thought there's some people that I know, I think, that could probably help me write this story. And I would do so not for me. I would actually probably dedicate all the earnings from it to an SPCA group, to be honest with you. But anything that would come out of it would be just advice to people, as I say, about trying to achieve a goal and realizing just all the ins and outs and ups and downs that are going to come along with it. Because one thing I do know, that as we go on in life, we learn about how much we didn't learn at school. I mean, we learned some things at school that are we learned some things at school that are very helpful. Day to day. I mean, I run into so many people that can't do simple math, but I don't know if that's a generational thing or what, but they really can't add 14 and 13 without thinking about it. And that is shocking. Or multiplications and stuff like that and they work in banks. And I just think you got to be kidding me, but it is. But that's just the education system and how much attention you pay. But I think the life lessons that you're not taught that's the responsibility of people like yourself, people like myself, people who work in any career. If you've spent, 30, 40 years working, you've got a story to tell. I don't care what you do. Tell your story, share it, the good and the bad, because the people that are going to be next in line here, and once again, as you get older, you kind of realize, oh yeah, this is going to end someday. And I mean, like, all of it's going to end. So I need to share what I've learned, so the next person who has their opportunity, and that's how I think we stay connected, and how life carries on, is when we pass it on. So, your words live in somebody else, and then they pass those words on, just like your father did. Or if you didn't have a father in your life, your mother, whomever, if you didn't have that, whomever your mentor was. But I have so many people that share just one-liner thoughts with me, and some of the names I've already brought up in this interview, that, even they're not a part of my daily life. And even if at some point they were to pass on before I did, they stay alive through me. And then their stories are going to stay alive through the story that I share and the story that you share. So to me, I think it's a long answer to your question. If I would write a book, I would work with, there's a couple of people I have in mind that I would work with if they'd even be interested. And that would be the purpose, is to say, hey, and I know what my story is. My story really is just persevering and realizing that all this time, and I said it earlier in this conversation, all this time that I felt I was ready, I was made to wait. And I hear more and more now from young people who want to get into these positions right away. And I did too. And actually, the very first, I need to remember the name, but it was CFRB 1010, back when they were the powerhouse of radio in Canada.
I remember.
Yeah, AM signal, for those that don't know. I graduated from college thinking that I can do this. I got this. I've 3 years. I graduated with honors from Niagara College. Was, spoken highly of by teachers and program coordinators, that, like, you're going to do well. Just keep working. So I get out and I start sending tapes out, and I got a reply from CFRB, because at that time, like, I am that guy who's coming out going, all right, I'm going to work at CFRB. Okay, Canada's #1 station in AM radio. You're really going to work there tomorrow. And I sent a tape, and I remember calling and following up on it. And I said, look, I want to come in and meet you. Or no, I wanted to send in a tape. And so I never mailed anything in. I always hand delivered my tapes back in those days, and they were actually cassette tapes. And I remember calling the news director at CFRB and asking, look, can I have 5 minutes of your time? I don't even want an interview. I just want to hand this off to you. I do not want to mail it to you. I want to say hello, shake your hand, and I'll be out of your way. And he said, look, Dan, I'm going to save you the problem. I'm going to save you your time and give you some advice. He says, I'm not going to listen to your demo. You just graduated from Niagara College. It's 1987. I need you to go work anywhere in the business for 10 years and then call me. And I thought, 10 years? Are you flipping kidding me? 10 years? So I think back to that and how upset I was and how insulted I felt. And now I look back, and I've already done the looking back on this. He was right. He was 100% bang on in, you need to go work somewhere else for 10 years before I even listen to your tape. Nowadays, they hire people who are just out of college because they don't want to pay you the money. And just the economics of radio obviously are way different than they used to be, that, for as much as radio really exists, the old school radio, although I have one in my office right over here. So, yeah, that was actually as I really recollect, that was the first time outside of any collegiate experience where someone told me, when I was that guy that thought I was ready, says, I'm not even going to listen to it. And when I listen back to stuff that I would put out when I graduated from college, there's not a chance in heck I would have been hired at CFRB. Even you had Dan Schulman on. I mean,
Yes.
the demo tape he sent to the Fan, I don't know if he talked about it, but that was not the Dan Schulman you hear now. The demo tape that Dan sent to the Fan is a voice that you'll literally, if you heard it right now, you would say, that is not Dan Schulman. So even Dan had to grow into, Dan before he took off, obviously, to the stars. So.
And I have to be honest too, there's been times where I've kind of been frustrated and stuff, but I've only been doing this for 5 years, and I was on a radio station in Georgia for 2 years. Unfortunately, they had to downsize, but I'm just going to keep plugging away at this, Dan. And I really want to say thank you so much for coming on. And just quick thoughts on Rob Ray going into the Sabres Hall of Fame as a player and a broadcaster, and as your broadcasting partner, quickly.
Yeah, well, real quick, it's funny because I know Rob as the broadcaster, and my first days of walking in and being around Buffalo, even as a Maple Leaf broadcaster, walking into the building, and Rob one day saying to me, "Hey, you should come work here. RJ's starting to dial things down a little bit. And that was kind of out of the blue. I didn't know Rob at that point. I certainly knew of him and knew of his playing career and followed it and knew of him being a broadcaster. But, he just kind of made this comment to me without us knowing each other when we were in passing one day at KeyBank Center. It was down by the Zamboni entrance, and that, nothing really ever came of that. But I kind of put it in my mind. I thought, you're the second person to say that, because Jack Armstrong at the Fan had mentioned it. So I know Rob as the broadcaster. I know Rob as being someone I consider a really good friend, someone that I care about, someone whose family is fantastic. And I said the other night during the Hall of Fame induction ceremonies, and I meant it, that, you think of Rob and everybody thinks about this legendary enforcer. I think about a guy that loves his family first, and the Sabres very close second, if not, 1A, 1B kind of thing. And then the city is 1C. There's really no number 2. It's family, Sabres, city, and everyone he can help. So I'm really proud of Rob. To imagine moving away from home as young as he did, not knowing where Buffalo was, and then just going all in. I mean, you talk about making sure you're in the right place at the right time. He listened to advice as well. If you had him on this show, he would tell you the advice that he listened to and who he listened to that afforded him the job in the NHL when he was drafted, and then he's playing in the American Hockey League. He was given some really key advice, and he followed it. And because he followed that advice and he put himself in position to be somewhere where he could get that kind of advice, it turned into a Hall of Fame career for him. Both, of course, with the trophy in the Hall of Fame with the Lady Byng, and then the Buffalo Sabres Hall of Fame as well. So I'm really proud of him. I look at some of the video of Rob fighting, and I think that's the same guy I'm working with right now. That is really weird. But it's really cool. And then the other thing, and I'll close on this, I got to know Ty before I got to know Rob from working in Toronto. And Ty Domi was the nicest guy to me of all the players that came through the Leafs. The guys I think of right away, Ty Domi and Todd Gill is another name of guys that were just salt of the earth, really good people. And everybody I never had a problem with anybody in the Leafs organization, from covering them at the Fan to working with them as a broadcaster. But those two names stood out. And to see Rob and Ty now have the friendship and respect for one another they have, both really loving their families, and their sons are in the game, and obviously with Max in the game, and Rob's son is playing now, and not in the NHL, but playing at a point in time where he hopes to maybe be drafted one day, and we'll see where that goes. But whether he does or he doesn't, it's the connection that Ty and Rob have, that without being a part of their everyday lives, but certainly knowing them well enough that I could call them friends, that I'm proud of both of them. And it's just really nice that they both kind of come full circle to being the men that they are now.
Finally, Dan, where can my audience follow you on social media? Your next Sabres broadcast, and Super Bowl 59. Who wins? Philadelphia Eagles, Kansas City Chiefs?
I want to say the Eagles win, because I do think that overall they're just the bigger team with enough talent that I think they're going to give Kansas City problems. But I'm going to say Kansas City is going to win despite everything I said, just because I'm going to go with coaching here. I'm going to go with coaching, and I'm going to go with the calmness of emotions in the moment. Now, I think it's going to come down to the last possession again, like I did feel it would between Buffalo and Kansas City. And if the Eagles have the ball last, they're going to have a chance to win the game. If the Chiefs have the ball last, it's going to be with a chance to win the game. And I can't go against the Chiefs yet. They haven't shown me that they're not going to win the game when they have the ball last. Or that they don't have the ability to make a play, whether it be blocking a kick or a strip on D. So I'm going to go with Reed and the defense in Kansas City, which many people think is just going to get run over, but there's no way they don't have a plan for it. There's not a chance they don't have a plan for it in Kansas City. So it's not going to be popular for me to say here. It's not a rooting thing, but I think Kansas City, and I'm not against winning teams either. I have a ton of respect for winning teams. And I think if you're not that winning team, you need to learn something from them. I was that way with the Patriots. I'm that way with, if the Lakers are going on any runs or whatever. When Golden State were going on runs, I thought, instead of hating them, learn something from them. I mean, you want to be them, so learn something from them. Don't turn it off and say, I can't watch. Can't watch it. Nope. Kansas City again. Well, watch it, because they're doing something you're not, better than you, and that's why they're there all the time. So I'm going to go with Chiefs. That was way too long of an answer to that part of your question. What was the first two questions you had there?
Just where can my audience follow you
Oh,
on
follow
social
me.
media?
Yeah.
And the next Sabres broadcast on WGN MSG
Yeah,
and WGR.
we're on Saturday night. We're in Nashville. Last game before the Four Nations break, so you can catch us on WGR 550. I don't know if the Odyssey app's available in Canada. I don't believe so.
Not
but
yet. No.
if you can find a way to somehow get it or VPN it, whatever you're legally allowed to do, you can do that. Or we're on MSG.
Or Sirius XM. I listen to you guys.
Sirius XM, yeah. I listen to Sirius XM all the time. Oh my gosh. NFL Network and NHL Network, my two stations, along with little Ozzy's Boneyard. So or a lot of Ozzy's Boneyard. You can listen to us there. As far as following me, I prefer you didn't. I'll give you my home line. It's 877. No. Just leave a message on my answering machine. And when I rewind the tape and listen to it, I'll get back to you as soon as I can. When I stop watching my JVC VCR beta tape of I don't know, Lady and the Tramp or something. I'm going all the way back to the 1980s here. No, yeah, on that platform where I'm not a big fan of a lot of it, but a lot of good can come of it. So on Twitter /X, Dan_Dunleavy. I'm all about like you on this. I do have to go, but I want to say here, since it's 12:30, it's all about if you can rescue an animal instead of buying one from a store, please do.
Adopt, don't shop.
Yeah, Chris knows all about this. We share the same kind of passion and love for rescuing dogs, cats, any kind of animal. If it's something you want to bring into your life, many of the organizations that you can look up, I know in the Buffalo area, and you can probably speak for Ontario, since I'm not living there at the moment, you can foster a pet before you actually take them on full time. You can, it's a little bit of a test drive just to make sure that the house is good, that you're good, the kids are good, and that any other animals in the home are good. But please rescue. And don't shop for dogs. At the end of the day, you're going to do what you want to do. I understand that. So does Chris. But there's just so much love and so much unconditional love that comes from a rescued animal, and the way that they rescue you in ways that you cannot even think of. It's just unbelievable. So that being said, mine are lying right on the other side of the computer here, and then I have to leave the house in half an hour. So they're getting 30 minutes of my love here as I say goodbye to you, Chris.
And absolutely, Dan, I want to say thank you so much for giving us almost an hour of your time. I apologize for keeping you over 30 minutes. And I'm hoping maybe in the future I can have you back on again and we can talk more about the SPCA, the local Humane Society here, and a little bit more about the Sabres, and continued success with you and Rob on the broadcast. Brian Colziol does a great job. Pat Malacaro has been great. And I'm going to try to come back to a Sabres game this year at the KeyBank Center as well.
All right. Well, make sure you say hello if you do. And thanks for having me on your show. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan. Have a great day.
All right. Take care.
You too. All right, guys, that concludes season 9, episode 49, overall 489 of Live with CDP Sports and Entertainment Talk Show, sponsored by Barry Cullen Chevrolet Dealership and Wellington Brewery here in Guelph. I want to say thank you to Dan Dunleavy, the Buffalo Sabres play-by-play announcer on the MSG network and WGR 550 here in Buffalo, New York. And before we wrap up our show, guys, I'm going to play a little video clip of a post-game interview I did with the Kitchener, Ontario native, the great Dane Smith, who had 10 points in the Bandits' 16-10 win over Albany this past Saturday night at the KeyBank Center. Please make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel and hit the like notification.
Moving, winding up in the net, it's almost like playing tic-tac-toe.
Yeah, definitely. It's amazing. And we go through stretch with our offense where we struggle, and it's tough when we're shorthanded and stuff like that. We seem to we're so talented at times. Our biggest default is, okay, it's my turn to go to the net. It's my turn to go to the net. JT has done a great job of bringing us back in, and as a leader, I try to bring everybody back in to say it's a commitment to stick to the game plan and play our game, and I think we've been successful with doing so.
His team has had a knack this year of scoring 2 goals back-to-back. It's like a box. You guys just almost daze your opponent. Where does that come from, to the ability to have those quick strike back-to-back goals? It seems like it's happening almost game by game now.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely helps with the crowd being in it, and obviously they're all winning draws and being successful. I feel like our ball team in general has gotten so much better over the years. But when the crowd's rocking as loud as they can, and you have a great defense and a great goaltender like Matt, the next one's so important, and we feed off that energy. So it's amazing that we've been successful.
You've been home since, I think, December 28th. How do you try and replicate the success the team is having without the fan aspect behind y'all?
Yeah, you know what? It's one of those things where each game we want to continue to get better. We want to dictate out there. I feel like the big word is dictate, because so many teams are so talented in this league, and they try different things on us, and it's important for us to stick to our game plan and make them change things on us. And we put pressure on them, and I think we've done a great job at that. Our penalty kill was amazing tonight, and it's just a team effort. When things aren't going your way, whether it's a bad call or whatever it may be, just keep your head down and work a little bit harder.
Dane,
You've had a unique schedule this year with all the weeks off. It's just, looking back now, has it helped you in terms of rest, or has it hurt you a little bit in terms of continuity and things have been going so good? Part of you wants to go out and play some more.
Yeah, it's frustrating for sure. I feel like it's hard to get in a rhythm, and you know what? It doesn't feel like we're 6-0. I feel like the last two games we were mad at ourselves, even though we won. We want to continue the success that we've been having, but it's tough. Obviously, we're doing something right because it's a strength of schedule kind of league, and obviously with all the bye weeks throughout the start, they want us to kind of get out of the rhythm, and then we have 12 games in 10 weeks. So this is going to be a big test for us, and we're kind of ready for it. So I'm excited to kind of go on the road and get to know the guys a little bit more and bond that way.
Dane, is anybody going to be working with Farrell on his penalty shots? And also, do you find it as an athlete too, it's sometimes hard to keep it up when you get a big lead on another opponent, like keep your foot on the gas?
Yeah, you know what? The first question, Connor, he works on his penalty shots quite a bit actually in practice. So we'll have to teach him a thing or two. He almost had him, but you know what? Every goalie in the series is great. So he made a great save. He made a great move as well. But as far as your second question goes, it is tough. You're not used to kind of being in a huge league. You saw in Philly, we were up by quite a bit, and instead of walking away with it, we kind of let them back in it. And when things are going so great, which they have been, it's hard to kind of just you're kind of like you take a little bit off the gas, like you said, and you're a little bit too relaxed instead of keep going and playing our game. We kind of get away from it, and we know we're going to be tested like we have been coming up here.
The annual question, Dane, with Tucker Williams night. You're one of the guys that has that connection. Not too many of the rookies obviously do. Do you tell the rest of the boys, the young kids, about the whole night?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I had a speech at the beginning. Obviously, I was 19 years old when I was on this team when it happened, and I didn't really understand it. And as I grew up, you run into more of those issues of people passing away, and you kind of start to understand it a little bit more. And it's a tragedy, you don't really understand what they go through and stuff like that. And I told the guys, like, this is a great opportunity to be thankful that we're able to play this game that we love and be breathing today, because I know Tucker, he wanted to fight and he kept fighting as a young kid. So I told the guys that no matter what happens tonight, we keep fighting, because if there's a bad call, if we make a bad play, we're lucky we get a second chance. And Tucker's an unbelievable person. It's just so cool to play Dyson out there. It's surreal. It makes me feel old, but it's an amazing event. And Scott Loeffler's done a great job, and we want to continue the success. And these games are ones that you mark on the calendar, and I feel like I wish it was every night, because I feel like I'm successful personally on these nights because it's bigger than myself.
Can you share if you said anything to Dyson at the end of the game?
I didn't. I wanted to do a jersey swap with them, but unfortunately, obviously, I understand the emotions of those type of games, and I know he was frustrated. I just told him I love him, and he played great, and he was a successful. He's a rookie, and he's doing very well. And obviously, look at his dad; he had a great career, and I can see Dyson having a great career as well. So hopefully, I get to see him again, And again, I love watching him play. And again, it makes me feel so old, but it's an amazing, opportunity to play against him.
Dane, how great has it been just in this game with having an offense where you have multiple guys that could just not only just score from the crease, but even from the perimeter?
Yeah, whenever we score by committee, I know everybody talks about Josh and Dane, and it's really not Josh and Dane. It's a unit, and I, as a playmaker, I like to get those guys the ball because they work so hard for me, and those are things that go unnoticed. My success is because of especially having the right sides like DeHoga, Bucky, and Fraser. They've done a great job of getting me open, and for me, it's my job to reward them. And when we're scoring like that, it's just so fun. Everybody enjoys it, and it's amazing. So we got to continue that success and take a little bit of pressure off our defense.
Thoughts on the Toronto Rock coming up on the 14th?
Yeah, we're excited about it. Obviously, it's a little bit away, but we know it's going to be a battle. It doesn't matter what their record is. They've been successful the past 2 games. They're getting healthier, which is amazing. We're looking forward to the challenge ahead. And those games, we don't like them, they don't like us, so they're the fun ones. It's easy to get up for that. We just got to play without emotion because you saw it tonight. We kind of were getting a little angry, and those are tough ones to bounce back at. And they're a team that can bury us if we stay in the penalty box. So we're going to enjoy the bye week to an extent, get back at practice, and work and get ready for Toronto.
So you did not have any more bye weeks this year?
I wouldn't say I'm excited to not have bye weeks. I wish we had one kind of towards the end of the season. So, but 12 games in 10 weeks, then going into the playoffs, like that's going to be a grind, and it's really going to test us. Again, like I said, we're looking forward to the challenge. It won't be easy. We'll see what we're made of.
All right, thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Well,
That video was courtesy of my YouTube channel, Chris Palme Live with CDP Sports and Entertainment Talk Show. Please hit the subscribe and like notification. That was Kitchener, Ontario native, the great Dane Smith, who had another big performance, 3 goals, 7 assists, 10 points in the Buffalo Bandits 16-10 win over Albany this past Saturday night at the KeyBank Center. The Buffalo Bandits are now 6-0 as back-to-back NLL champions, and they have a bye week, and they're off until Friday, February 14th. I think it's 7 or 7:30. They're on the road in Mississauga to take on their QEW rivals, the Toronto Rock. And the Bandits are back home at the KeyBank Center on Saturday, February 15th at 7:30 against the San Diego Seals. You can get tickets at bandits.com and check out the National Lacrosse League's website, NLL.com as well. Before we wrap up this show, guys, the next Live with CDP Sports and Entertainment Talk Show, sponsored by Barry Cullen Chevrolet Dealership and Wellington Brewery here in Guelph, is going to be tonight, Wednesday, February 5th, which is tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern, with my special guest making her 5th appearance, Kelly Dudzik. She is an anchor reporter with WGRZ Channel 2 in Buffalo. So check out Live with CDP tonight at 7 o'clock with Kelly Dudzik. We're going to talk with her and some of her latest stories and interviews she's doing with WGR Channel 2 in Buffalo. And then tomorrow, Thursday, February 6th at 12:30 p.m. I have a special guest. Her name is Jen Hammond. She is a sports reporter anchor with Fox 2 News in Detroit, and she's going to come on and talk Detroit Lions, Red Wings, and Pistons with us as well. And Jen's been with Fox 2 Detroit, I believe, since 1997. So she's a veteran in the Detroit media market. So I'm excited to have Jen Hammond on. And then tomorrow night, I have a doubleheader again at 7:30. Nick Small, host from the Argo Bounce Live audio show. Nick will be my guest on Thursday night at 7:30. And Nick and I are going to talk about the Toronto Argonauts and the off season and free agency and the 2025 CFL schedule that came out. So if you're a fan of the Toronto Argonauts, Canadian Football League, check out Live CDP Sports and Entertainment Talk Show tomorrow at 7:30 with Nick, and 12:30 earlier in the day with Jen Hammond from Fox 2 in Detroit. I want to say thank you to Dan Dunleavy, the Buffalo Sabres play-by-play announcer on MSG Network and WGR 550 in Buffalo, for coming on here again. And I want to say thank you to everyone watching this live streamed on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, X, Instagram, and all major audio platforms, and also now available on the stream Stream Punk Entertainment Network, thanks to Scott Churchin as well. I hope everybody has a great afternoon, and we'll see you back here tonight at 7 o'clock with Kelly Dudzik from WGRZ Channel 2 in Buffalo. Have a great day, everybody, and thanks again for watching and listening to Live with CDP Sports and Entertainment Talk Show, brought to you by Barry Cullen Chevrolet Dealership and Wellington Brewery here in Guelph.